chronically stressed out. And, except for Fred Skanga, I think that probably he's an anomaly. But anyway, so including our leaders, physicians, etc., they believe 30 to 50% of physicians, advanced practice providers, nurses, and other clinicians are affected, which increases risk of depression, decreased job satisfaction, decreased quality of life, increased suicidal ideation, and the worst, well, not really, because that's pretty bad, suicidal ideation in our caregivers, but its replacement cost is 1.2 to 1.3 times the salary for registered nurses. So you're losing a person because they're dealing with a hostile workplace. It's costing you $88,000 maybe to replace them, and more for other clinicians, and the increase of stress and workplace bullying. So we should look proactively again, and here is our solution, right? It really is. So just some fun other things for us to look at. Anybody hear about this one? Did that cup get that name on it by itself? Who did that? What is that to us in our enterprise risk management? This is not just strategic, but this is financial, this is operational, this is everything. So if we can share, remember the definition of emotional intelligence is being aware of what is our behavior in that moment and the impact on others. This should never have happened. That person should be respectful. They can believe what they want. This was an interesting one because this was on Long Island and was in the New York Post, which is even worse. Because what do we never want to be in unless it's good? Thank you. A 347-pound smoke eater is suing his fellow longtime firefighters for harassing him about his weight. By the way, this is a volunteer fire department, just saying. Have a donut, they taunted while calling him a cow. They also harangued him for taking up 2 seats in the fire truck. Since he joined the force in 2017, passing his physical exam, everybody teased this man, and the bosses, I guess the chiefs, ignored his complaints. So it's not just in healthcare. Our behavior, as we know, is kind of a little bit volatile in many instances nowadays, but this should never have happened. How about that? Is this something that we have to worry about every day? Who's responsible for this behavior? And would you not think that if we recognize that our emotions are becoming out of control and we are not able to handle the situation at the very moment, that this could be prevented? Now, we do background checks, and we do the best we can. You cannot prevent 100% of everything, but I think that this is where we need to start. So we're not like this at night when we see our time. We're doing this. So instead of the usual reactive approach, putting out the fires and being there like when we get in saying, oh, this is what happened last night, I'm suggesting that we identify enterprise risk management behavior of our workforce and look at this type of, proactive quality improvement cycle. Anybody ever do one of these? So we can use this type of a form to evaluate the failure mode effect analysis of the severity, occurrence, etc. of our behaviors that are occurring in our facility, and try to identify if there's a common thread and how we can try to modify the action in our building. So one more part of impact of our lifetime of learned behavior. Anybody ever hear of this? How many ACE study? Okay, so in 1995, the Center for Disease Control they created this study. It was the CBC Kaiser Permanente Average Childhood Experience Study. And they found that these 10 situations in our childhood significantly impact our life experience. So you know how I did that? I showed you the emotional overwhelm cycle, the centers into there. I have a really great video if we do have time. I don't know, let me do sort of it. RuPaul actually was on a video I happened to see the other day, and I have it. And he talked about the divorce in his family, and he talked about the impact of that on his life, that he had to bury. He created RuPaul to hide his pain. It's really horrible. So my daughter, and how I really got interested in this, my daughter, my youngest, is 24. She'll be 25 in a few days. And she had 10 people in her circle pass of either suicide or drug use in 2 years. And two of her very nice friends, one did bulimia, and one did the non-suicidal self-injury because of the divorce in their families, and they didn't know how to deal with it. This is another reason that this should be concerning. So this was really interesting, because now we're looking at our enterprise risk management component here, which I lost my little graphic. We're looking at this as human capital. So this clinician, this was a study that was done from the, it's a actual valid source, National Center for Biotechnology, part of the National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health. But they had looked at how third-year medical students compared to the general population. The concept was that this was a more socioeconomic, higher socioeconomic group of people, and that these people, shouldn't have any significant issues. But they found that 40% had ACE scores of between 1 and 3, and 12% had ACE scores of 4 or more. And the study investigator said you could assume because physicians and medical students come from more affluent backgrounds than the general population, they were to have lower prevalence of ACEs, but that was not the case. All the students who had ACE scores of 4 or more were women. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse were parts of things that were affected to them. And they didn't have the resiliency skill sets to stay on track. Negative outcomes of this are here, 64%. So the ACE scores of the medical students mirror the general population. By the way, one of the gentlemen from Suffolk County Veteran Services and I were talking, and this is very impactful for you here, that this is stuff that doesn't go away. And it is tremendously impactful in these people's life, this childhood trauma. We know nothing about it. Anyway, 64% of the population has at least one, 12% has 4 or more. And this is the outcomes. Look at the heightened use of alcoholism, suicide, and IV drug use. It's just interesting. Isn't this like kind of cool? I know that's like right? Kind of neat. So we also need to be concerned because this is stuff that is affecting in our workplace. And when we look back at our enterprise risk management cycle, we usually will refer these people for EAP, but we can do it as an EPP. And just because this is what was doesn't mean this is what is. And we could really help our workers move forward. And if we have awesome and happy and healthy mindset workers, what do we have? Exactly. Less absenteeism, less injury, less hostility, less lawsuits. So this is actually the ACE pyramid. They have the adverse childhood experience. You can't stop people from beating their children. You can't do whatever you can do, right? You have the disrupted neurodevelopment under 6 and especially under 17 in that area. And then this emotional and cognitive impairment. So every person coming to you is that woman, Susie, practically. I did do some research, and I did find very interesting, in order to have an enjoyable life experience, it is important to learn how to. So I did this with our local high school. 727 students responded out of 1,131, so it was a statistically significant sample. And I did this after writing that book, because the book is reactive, right? If I knew then what I know now. So how do I know how to, right? Anybody have any ideas or thoughts what they answered?
Have fun.
Have fun. It's a good one. You want to know what? How to code?
Love.
How about that? How many people, this was 92% agreed or strongly agreed, how many people do you know that are not? And a lot of times, believe it or not, did anybody here ever watch the 600-Pound Life? Do you ever hear this root cause, my dad, my this, right? It doesn't go away. This was just of interest as well, and it was done at Stony Brook Medical Center, and it was published in 2010 by a Dr. Stone and Broderick. They just actually redid this study. This is called the U-Bend of Happiness, and it was 47.2 in the new study, so it's pretty accurate. Of course, we have to consider the increase of depression and suicidal ideation in our environment, especially in our 9-year-olds to 14-year-old children. I'm telling you this because these are your people walking into your building every day. So they found that they started to be more happier after the 50, or the new study, 47.2, because they've learned enough life and coping skills so that they're not as unhappy and things don't bother people as much. But that's our average life expectancy. So do we want to wait? And I asked the kids, the 11-year-olds, I said, do you guys want to wait until you're 50 to be happy? And they're like, no. So, and here's what we do most of our life, right? So this is the hope to share about how to build a stream. It's not just, oh, it's nice if we could offer our team some emotional intelligence. It's physically costing you vocal bucks. We could, with this positive, proactive, enterprise-wide social and emotional intelligence education, we can reduce enterprise risk, we can increase productivity, we can retain our people, we can have better employee satisfaction and engagement, our reputation, our customer satisfaction, our profitability, and it will, of course, trickle into our families. So that's also a really awesome thing that we do. The biggest group I did was 367 people. They rented out the Tilla Center. We did a big emotional intelligence skill set, like the right one that I showed you, and changed the entire culture of that building like no tomorrow. So again, self-awareness is our foundational skill set. We really need to know how we're feeling at any given time, because that's really impactful on our customer satisfaction and our patient care outcomes. So I do have another thing for you, and I decided to wait till the end to hand it out. This is something that, oh, thank you. Thank you, Mike. So this is a feelings inventory. So, of course, the self-assessment that I gave you was very small. It didn't really give you a lot, but this is such an awesome thing. So this gives you some feelings of how are you feeling, how you can name how you're feeling, and on the back is this Name It worksheet. So a lot of times we don't recognize at what point we start becoming emotionally overwhelmed. And here is like a thing that you can do as a log. And I usually tell anybody I coach that they should do a week of this. And then find out exactly where, it's like a quality improvement process, you know, and just a little QI. And I'm sorry for all the trees that I killed to hang that all the time. I also made these awesome stop signs. I do have a few. If anybody's interested, you can contact me and I can send them to you. But it is stop at your choice. So that building where I did the 367 people, this was on everybody's desk. They did it, the staff. Every refrigerator, every hallway, everywhere. And it reminded people to take that breath so that they weren't, you know, making a issue with the rest of the team. And I hope that showed you how that this can help your workplace flourish in a manner that we really have never considered. If anybody's in New York, I'm going to be conducting a roundtable on addressing workplace behaviors and workplace hostility and its impact on enterprise risk management at Lenox Hospital with Armani, the Association of Healthcare Risk Managers of New York. That's on the 19th of March, if somebody's close enough. And this is my contact. So any questions, any thoughts? And I have lots of gifts and fun stuff. So, and I'm really good. That was exactly an hour. I do have business cards up here too for contact. Jonathan, do you want to help me do raffles? So I do have some things I can pass around. I have who plays golf. I have time to play golf. Thanks.
Marquita, Louisiana.
All right. So I have this reminder to enjoy life. Time to play sharp for you.
Thank you, Dana.
Carl Yugi. Carl? How do you pronounce it? Yugi. All right.
So I have a keep calm and take time to play shirt for you.
Mr. Joseph Himmelden. Joseph? Oh, Joseph. Okay. Lisa Donner. She's not here.
That stuff works good. I'm going to use it.
Josiah Dawson.
Awesome. Okay, so I have to explain this one for a second. So you know how I said I've worked in healthcare into nursing homes, right? So seeing people that are sad at end of life and, you know, in the nursing home and all that kind of thing. Somebody will say, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm tired, etc. I need this awesome, I'm awesome workshop t-shirt. So this was what I did for the kids. That was what we were doing for the 11-year-old kids. So that I am awesome. And I have one more. One more. Ah, sorry.
Mark Griffin.
Mark, you get them back.
Mark. All right.
Okay, so I have some golf tees that say time to play, and I also have these it's time to enjoy life wristbands to remind us to enjoy life, even at work. Thank you. You're welcome, Mark. Did you guys have any discussion, thoughts, questions that you want to add? I'll pass these out this way, and then you guys take and just pass. I also have, if anybody's really wanting one, I have a, it's time to enjoy life little chip that you could keep in your pocket, so if you're stressed, you can hold it. And I have Create Solutions and not Band-Aids, magnets. So I'm going to leave those up here. This is heavy, so you're welcome to whatever you like.
We'd like to give you a token of our appreciation for coming out and sharing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad.